Home is supposed to be where the keys work and the ground is yours. The morning they towed my car from my own driveway, it felt like someone had swapped the locks on my life. By sundown, I'd learned the heaviest tool in a homeowner's toolbox. Isn't a wrench, it's a well-read rule book. If you've ever walked out into the sun and felt it keep a secret from you, you know the sensation I had standing on my porch at 7:12 a.m., coffee steaming, keys in my palm, the day yawning open, and then my driveway staring back at me, blank as a lie. My car was gone. Not gone like my husband borrowed it. He works out of town and hates the way my hatchback smells faintly like wet dog and cedar chips. Not gone like I misplaced it. One doesn't misplace a dented blue Civic that's known the shame of the same little rust bloom for 3 winters running. It was gone like something had reached down, pinched up the world by the roof rails, and lifted. Where the car usually slept, there was a dark rectangle of clean concrete and, near the slope toward the street, the familiar oil stain that looks like the state of Florida after a long rain. The shape stared at me like an accusation. I took a sip of coffee and felt it turn to stone. At first, I did the polite thing. I doubted myself. I scanned the curb. I checked the side yard where we sometimes tuck the trash cans if the raccoons are getting bold. I even peered into the garage as if, in the night, I might have reverse Tetrised it through the lawnmower and the bikes. It wasn't there. That's when I noticed the orange sticker flapping against our mailbox post like a tired flag. Vehicle. Violation, it announced in block letters, and underneath, in smaller font, a note. Inoperable vehicle and/or expired registration. Towed per Ridgetop Oaks HOA Bylaws, Section 8.2. Inoperable? The Civic groans like a high school tuba, but it starts every morning, even on the cold ones when the grass looks sugared. Expired registration? I felt heat climb my neck, reached into my bag, dug through receipts and grocery coupons until my fingers caught the thin rectangle of my registration slip, renewed online last week. The sticker was still on my kitchen counter, trapped beneath a magnet that says, "You've got this," with a fistful of daisies. The irony almost made me laugh. Across the street, Mrs. Larkin stood in her bay window, in that robe that looks like a migrating flock, and watched me. She is the kind of neighbor who knows what your recycling reveals about your character. The curtains twitched, and she disappeared. I suddenly couldn't stand still. I set my coffee on the porch rail, marched to the orange notice, peeled it free. The adhesive tugged at the paint like it wanted to take a souvenir. There was a phone, number for tow right services, and a fine amount that made my stomach flip. $285 plus $35 per day. I dialed. When the hold music popped on, something chipper and unhinged like a xylophone having a manic episode, I pressed the phone closer to my ear, like that would conjure a person faster. "Tow right services," a woman answered. She sounded like someone who kept her pens all pointing the same direction. "Yes, hi. My vehicle was taken from my driveway this morning." "My driveway. It's a blue Honda Civic. The notice says it was towed per the HOA." She clicked keys that I could hear through the line. "Address?" I gave it. There was a beat. "Okay, ma'am, we have it. Towed at 5:03 a.m. At 5 in the... What? Why? It wasn't blocking anything. It runs. The registration is current. They can't just..." I pinched the bridge of my nose. The world fuzzed. "They took it from my driveway." "Authorization provided by Ridgetop Oaks Association," she recited. "If you believe it was in error, you can take it up with them. Our fee schedule is..." "I have to get to work," I said, hearing a shrill edge sneak into my voice. "I'm a teacher. My students..." "I understand," she said in a tone that meant she understood exactly as much as her policy required. "We're open until 6. I hung up before she could list the payment options and slid the notice into my bag as if I might later present it like evidence to a skeptical jury. The porch felt tilted beneath my feet. Somewhere down the block, a sprinkler clicked on and water hissed across a lawn. The ordinary world had the gall to go on. By the time I reached our kitchen, the coffee had cooled into a bitter puddle. The registration sticker glinted beneath the daisies magnet, smug as a coin. I peeled it up and pressed it smooth onto the paper in my hand, as if retroactively curing the problem might rewrite the morning. The magnet curled to the floor with a soft clack. "You've got this." "Do I?" I asked the empty room, and my voice sounded small. It wasn't until I opened the junk drawer, hunting, I think, for a pen to scribble numbers, a scrap of control, that I saw the packet we'd been given when we bought the house. Ridgetop Oaks Homeowners Association, welcome packet, rules and regulations. I had tossed it here months ago, the way you toss the manual for a toaster you assume will always pop. The edges were frayed, the corner bruised by rubber bands and takeout menus. I slid it out, felt the weight of it in my hands. On the front, someone had underlined in red pen, "We are a community of shared standards." My heart thudded. I wasn't ready, not yet, to dive into that thicket of small print and passive verbs. Right now, I needed my car. The morning bell at Merritt Middle would ring in an hour, and I had a lab quiz on hydrology to set out. I texted Mina from down the street, she of reliable Honda Odyssey and flexible mornings, and within 5 minutes my phone buzzed, "On my way." Also, what the actual hell? I stood in the doorway, the packet in one hand, the orange notice in the other, and I became aware of a quiet anger moving through me, like groundwater seeping unseen until it finds daylight. I have never been especially brave. I prefer compromise. To confrontation, I am the kind of person who brings muffins to meetings that might turn tense. But the driveway was mine. The car was mine. My students were mine. And this was wrong. I tucked the packet into my bag, along with a pen and a clean notebook. If they were going to make me learn the rules to live in my own home, then fine. I would learn them. And when Mina pulled up and I climbed into her minivan, the orange notice crackling in my fist, I had the oddest sensation that something in me had already clicked open, like a padlock whose combination I suddenly understood. The bell at Merritt Middle is not a sound so much as a ripple. It goes off, and 100 lives surge forward, and normally I let myself be carried. Attendance, jokes about the ancient projector, a reminder to put names on papers. But that morning, the ripple hit a sandbar in me. I kept glancing at the clock and at the orange notice folded in my bag like a flame. "Miss..." Jordan lingered after I passed out the hydrology quiz. "You okay? You look like when my mom forgot the birthday cake in the car and we were all pretending it wasn't melting." "I'm fine," I said, and heard the brittleness of it. I swallowed. "Just dealing with a situation." He nodded, solemn as a little magistrate. "Hope whoever did it gets consequences." His freckled earnestness made my eyes sting. I escaped to the sink to rinse beakers, while the room filled with the scratch of pencils and the small chorus of sighs only a quiz can summon. At lunch, I sat alone in my classroom, door open, the smell of pencil shavings and lemon cleaner mixing with the cafeteria's distant tater tots. I dialed the HOA number on the notice and braced myself. "Ridgetop Oaks Community Management. This is Derek," came a voice slick with practiced calm. I introduced myself and stated it plainly. My car was towed from my driveway at 5 a.m. The notice cites Section 8.2 for inoperable or expired registration. My car runs. My registration was renewed last week. No one notified me. How do we fix this? "Let me pull up your file," he said, a rustle of keys like rain. "Ah, vehicle, parked in view with expired tag. Community standards prohibit..." "The tag was renewed," I cut in. "Sticker not affixed yet. Also, it was in my driveway, not a common area, not a street." He sighed his weary of you sigh. "The CC&Rs empower management to address violations, visible from the street." "Does address mean tow without warning?" My voice had edges now. "Section 8.2. Do you have it in front of you?" "I do," he said, and I could picture him tapping the page as if that gave him jurisdiction over my morning. Vehicles with expired registration or inoperable condition may be towed. Does it include a notice requirement? I asked. A small, treacherous part of me hoped he'd say no, that I'd be wrong, that I could sink back into our old arrangement with the world. He cleared his throat. It says notice may be provided at management's discretion, he offered, careful as a man carrying soup. May or shall? I asked, because my car is sitting in a lot behind chain link as we speak. Silence, brief but meaningful. I'll follow up in writing, I said, and hung up before my temper could warm any brighter. At 3, Mina idled at the curb with her van full of toddler crumbs and saintly patience. Let's go buy your car back, she said, and I loved her for the way she said it, honest about the indignity. Tow right sat in the industrial part of town where the asphalt gets old and the sky looks dustier. The office had a bell that chimed when I opened the door and a countertop nicked by 1,000 arguments. Behind it, a woman with a neat bun and a nameplate that said Janelle slid a clipboard toward me like a test she'd graded before I even took it. I need to see your itemized invoice, I said, steady, and a copy of the authorization from the HOA, plus any photos taken prior to tow. Her eyes flicked up. Why? Because I'm paying under protest, I said. The phrase tasted metallic but strong. And I want documentation for reimbursement. Something in my tone or my posture shifted us from annoying customer to person who has read a manual. She printed papers, the machine coughing them out, a timestamp, 5:03 a.m., an authorization signed by P. Garza, compliance, and 2 photos of my Civic sitting in my driveway in the early blue of morning. In one, you could see the dew beating on the hood. In neither could you see my fresh registration sticker. The Daisies magnet had kept it prisoner on my fridge. $285, Janelle said, softening a fraction. Cash or card? If you want me to note paid under protest, I can stamp it. Please, I said, and watched that purple ink bless the receipt like a seal on a treaty. Out in the lot, my car crouched between a pickup missing a door and a BMW that looked offended to be there. I put my hand on the Civic's roof, absurdly glad to feel its heat. I drove home like I do after a storm, slow, alert for downed lines. At my kitchen table, I spread the papers like a map. The photos made me ache with a guilt I knew was performative. I hadn't stuck the sticker. I did it now, peeling and pressing with the ceremony of a bandage. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the HOA packet. Homeowners learn a new language when they buy a place. CC&Rs, bylaws, rules and regs. The CC&Rs are the spine. The bylaws are the bones of the board. The rules are the clothing they keep. Changing. Section 8.2 lived under vehicle and parking standards. I traced the lines with my finger. Inoperable vehicles, it defined, include but are not limited to flat tires, significant body damage, missing windows, missing engine, components, vehicles on blocks. My Civic might be humble, but it had all its parts and then some, including the rogue French fry colony under the passenger seat. Unregistered vehicles, it continued, are those with expired tags. Fine. But then, in a paragraph whose font felt smaller because it mattered more, it said, Owner-occupied lots. Management shall provide written notice affixed to the vehicle and 72 hours opportunity to cure prior to tow, except in case of immediate hazard or obstruction of emergency access. I sat back. The sticker had arrived after the tow. My driveway is not a fire lane, no hazard, no obstruction. The word shall shone like a door left unlocked. My anger, which had been pacing like an animal, sat down, wagged its tail. Not triumph, focus. Mina texted, How'd it go? Get the beast back? Got it. Got paperwork. Found a line that might save me, I wrote. I took photos of the packet page, the receipt stamped paid under protest, the tow authorization, and the empty entrance to Ridgetop Oaks where, as I discovered on a quick detour, the required towing warning sign was a sun-bleached rectangle. That mentioned no overnight street parking, but said nothing about private driveways or immediate tow. I photographed that too, my reflection a small ghost in the plexiglass. Okay, I told the quiet house, stacking my evidence like bricks. We're building something. What exactly I didn't know yet. But for the first time since 7/12 that morning, I could imagine a version of the day that ended with someone else paying. It turns out anger can learn to use a stapler. Mine did. By evening, the kitchen table had transformed into a war room, printer humming, highlighters bleeding neon roadways across paper, my civics receipt sitting like a small, expensive confession. Built a binder because I needed something to hold me up, a spine while mine was still learning. I labeled the tabs with teacherly precision: timeline, photos, CC&Rs, state law, correspondence, receipts. Under timeline, I wrote in neat, measured ink: 5:03 a.m., vehicle towed from private driveway; 7:12 a.m., discovered tow. Tow right confirms. 12:18 p.m., phone call with Derek, Ridgetop Oaks Management; 3:47 p.m., paid $285 under protest, retrieved vehicle. 5:22 p.m., photographs of entrance sign and driveway taken, seeing my day as a sequence steadied. Me, like proof that I hadn't been swept away by feelings but had, in fact, waded through events. Under photos, I tucked the printed images. My car, dew beating like pearls. The bleached entrance sign that sternly prohibited overnight street parking, but did not whisper a word about private driveways. The ridiculous bravery of my new registration. Sticker, now pressed obediently onto my plate. Then I cracked the CC&Rs again. The word shall still glowed. I copied the paragraph in my own hand, like scripture I meant to memorize. Owner-occupied lots. Management shall provide written notice affixed to the vehicle and 72 hours opportunity to cure prior. To tow except in case of immediate hazard or obstruction of emergency access. I underlined shall. I circled hazard. I wrote in the margin, my driveway is not an emergency lane. Google became my stern aunt and my co-counsel. State towing statute. I fell into a rabbit hole of sub-paragraphs and definitions, the legalese like gravel in my mouth. But the gist emerged. On private residential property, towing without proper signage and notice is restricted. The tow company must have an authorization identifying the vehicle and the reason. The property must post signage with specific language visible at each entrance. Our entrance had a sign about street parking, silent on driveways. In some states, to tow from a private driveway, the owner's signed consent is needed at the time of tow unless it's blocking emergency access. At 5:03 a.m., my Civic had blocked nothing but the morning's peace. I drafted the letter with the care of a lesson plan I needed to work the first time. It opened formally, but my heartbeat thudded behind each line. Demand for reimbursement and request for internal dispute resolution to the Board of Directors, Ridgetop Oaks HOA, and Ridgetop Oaks Community Management on date. My vehicle was towed from my private driveway at 5:03 a.m. without prior written notice, contrary to CC&R Section 8.2, Vehicles, which states that for owner-occupied lots, management shall provide written notice affixed to the vehicle and 72 hours to cure, except in cases of hazard or obstruction. No such hazard existed. My vehicle was operable and legally registered. Proof enclosed. The community entrance lacks the towing signage required by state law to authorize removal from private property. Photos enclosed. Accordingly, I request reimbursement of $285, receipt enclosed, within 10 business days, and confirmation that management will cease towing from private driveways absent the required notice and legal prerequisites. Please consider this my request for internal dispute resolution under the HOA's governing documents. I also request my matter be placed on the agenda for the next open board meeting. Exhibits AE, receipt, paid under protest, tow authorization, P. Garza, photographs, Vehicle Entrance Sign, CC&Rs, Section 8.2, Proof of Registration. Sincerely, my name, lot, number, address, CC, compliance officer, management, tow right services. I read it aloud until my voice could carry it without breaking. Then I printed 3 copies, slid them into plastic sleeves, and felt the small satisfaction of the binder ring snapping shut. On impulse, I walked across the street. Mrs. Larkin opened her door in a cardigan the color of egg yolks and peered at my binder like it might sell her something. "Quick question," I said. "Did you see anything this morning around 5? Her eyebrows climbed. I did, actually. Woke up to the trash truck and watched the circus. A white pickup with a little flashing amber light. 2 men. One took pictures, the other hooked your car like a fish and reeled it away. No note left on your windshield, I can tell you that. I'd have seen it." "Thank you," I said, throat tight. "Would you be willing to write that down? Just a sentence. I'm asking for a hearing." She softened. Just a hair. "I'll do better. I'll come," she said, and I had to swallow. Twice before I trusted my voice. 2 houses down, Mr. Ortega listened with his door half open, his dog pressing a hopeful nose through the gap. "They took my daughter's car last month," he said in a low voice, as if the HOA could hear through drywall. "Said she parked wrong. We never got warning. Paid $400. I still feel sick about it." His eyes flicked to my binder. "Tell me when the meeting is." By the time the letters were emailed and their paper twins slid into certified mail envelopes, the sky had gone the color of dishwater, and the kitchen smelled like toner. Mina texted a picture of a celebratory muffin and 3 flexing arms. I smiled and then, immediately after, trembled from sternum to fingertips, the adrenaline draining like a tide. I poured water. I sat with it. At 9:17 p.m., an email pinged. From Derek. "We take compliance seriously. Per Section 8.2, vehicles with expired tags may be towed. As a courtesy, we are willing to waive any HOA fines associated with this incident. Towing charges are between you and the tow company." I stared. At the screen, the word courtesy like a pat on the head. I replied with the steadiness of someone who had practiced. "Thank you, Derek." Respectfully, Section 8.2 requires 72 hours written notice for owner-occupied lots, absent hazard. No notice was provided. Please see Exhibits AE. I renew my request for reimbursement and an IDR. I also request placement on the next board agenda. At 10:03, another ping. Your request for hearing is acknowledged. The board will consider your appeal on Tuesday at 7 p.m. at the clubhouse. You will have 3 minutes to speak and may present documentation. 3 minutes. It would have to be enough. I shut the binder, ran my palm across its plastic cover, and whispered the way I do before the first day of school, "You've got this." The magnet on the fridge, recovered from the floor, nodded its small approval. Teachers know the tyranny of the clock better than most. 45 minutes to explain erosion or photosynthesis or why it matters to put your name on your paper. But 3 minutes? 3 minutes felt like a dare. 360 seconds. To unspool a day of indignation into something that could be heard without everyone running for cover. I trimmed my notes until they fit on a single index card. Not the truth. Truth doesn't fit on cards, but the spine of it. I practiced in the bathroom because the mirror doesn't interrupt. I kept my binder on the counter like a talisman. Tabs snug, exhibits in order, purple paid under protest stamp flashing like a bruise. The magnet on the fridge watched from its new post by the faucet. "You've got this." I tucked it into my bag like a pocket charm. The clubhouse smelled like pool chlorine and lemon cleaner and the kind of coffee that comes out of large silver urns. Folding chairs had been arranged in neat rows facing a folding table. Government on a budget. Buy. Flag in the corner tried to look important. Derek sat behind a laptop, mouth a straight line. Next to him, a neat woman with a severe bun and a name placard that read, Patricia Garza, compliance. So that was P. Garza. The president, Cheryl, wore a blazer the color of a bruise and a smile that said she'd expected more of a fight from her hair. A man with a calculator watch, Lionel, treasurer, flipped through a stapled packet as if it owed him money. I signed in and took a seat. Mina slid into the chair beside me and gave my knee a squeeze. "We brought our small army," she whispered, chin tipping toward the back where Mrs. Larkin sat upright in a cardigan that could stop traffic, and Mr. Ortega hunched like a question mark, his cap twisting in his hands. Two other neighbors I knew by dog names rather than people names drifted in and took seats. I felt the warm hum of being accompanied. The board did its board things first. Minutes approved, pool pump funding approved, discussion on holiday wreath. Parameters devolved briefly into a debate about whether glitter counts as a safety hazard. It all felt so wildly ordinary I had to remind myself why my heart was pounding. "Public comment," Cheryl announced. 3 minutes per speaker. Please state your name and lot number. Her gaze swept the rows and then landed on me, binder in lap, hand already halfway up, like muscle memory from a lifetime of volunteers. I stood and carried the binder to the small lectern because I needed the feel of my hands on wood. "Good evening. My name, Lot 14. My voice sounded like I'd borrowed it from someone who wasn't as scared as me. On Tuesday morning at 5:03 a.m., my car was towed from my private driveway. I let the sentence sit for one heartbeat. There was the smallest ripple in the rows. People lean in without knowing. You can feel it. I understand the importance of standards, I continued. I teach science at Merritt Middle. Rules make communities run. But your rules, our rules. Say this. I slid Exhibit C onto the board table, CC&Rs Section 8.2, highlighted. Owner-occupied lots. Management shall provide written notice affixed to the vehicle and 72 hours to cure prior to tow, except in case of hazard or obstruction. Traced the neat underline with my finger. Not may, shall. There was no hazard. My driveway is not a fire lane. My car was operable. Tow Right's own photo shows due on the hood. My registration was renewed a week prior. The sticker was not yet affixed. That's on me. But this, I tapped the page, is on you. Cheryl's smile tightened. Lionel raised his eyebrows like a drawbridge. Patricia's pen hovered above her legal pad, an insect suspended in amber. I set Exhibit A, my receipt, stamped, and Exhibit B, the tow authorization with Patricia's neat signature, beside it. Additionally, state towing law requires specific signage at each entrance when removing vehicles from private property. Our entrance sign addresses Overnight Street. Parking. It says nothing about towing from private driveways without notice. Exhibit D. I slid the photo forward, my small reflection caught in its plexiglass like a ghost of my morning. At my back, I heard the tiny organized sound of Mrs. Larkin clearing her throat. "And I watched them," she called without waiting to be invited. Cheryl blinked. "From my window, no notice placed. 2 men at 5:00-something in the morning and off they went." Patricia leaned toward her mic. "Per Section 8.2, expired registration is a violation and subject to tow." "And per the very next sentence," I said, the teacher in me stepping into the space. "Owner-occupied lots get 72 hours to cure. That's not a courtesy. That's due process. It's a promise we made to each other in ink." Murmurs. Mr. Ortega raised a hand halfway as if asking permission in class. "They took my daughter's car last month," he said. "No notice either." Cheryl held up a palm, smoothing the air. "Thank you. We appreciate your comments. This is not a back and forth. The board will consider." I breathed in, held it just long enough to steady the tremble in my hands, and placed my final page on the table. A simple request typed in 12-point font. I am requesting reimbursement of $285 within 10 business days, and that the board direct management to comply with Section 8.2 notice requirements for owner-occupied lots, update entrance signage to meet state law, and suspend towing from private driveways absent hazard until those steps are complete. Cheryl glanced at Derek, who blinked in that slow way that says later. Lionel busied himself with his calculator watch, which I suspect did not have a mode for moral math. Patricia's pen started moving again, wings flitting forward. "Your time," Derek said softly, eyes on the laptop clock. 3 minutes, I said, managing a small smile, "is an awfully short time to put a car back where it belongs." The room laughed, kindly. I stepped back. They called 2 more speakers, one about a fence variance, one about someone's unleashed terrier who was apparently terrorizing joggers, and then Cheryl rapped her gavel. "We'll take a short recess and then move to executive session." The hall outside the meeting room had a soda machine that blinked at me like a spaceship. Mina bought me a Diet Coke and put it in my hand as if it were a prescription. "Whatever happens," she said, "you were clear. You were good." I nodded and felt the strain of holding myself upright loosen a fraction. Mrs. Larkin joined, us, her cardigan fending off the chill. "You had them," she said, "with the shall. You said it like a thing that cannot be wrestled with." "I hope so," I said, the hope a skittish animal in my chest. Mr. Ortega hovered nearby, eyes on his shoes. "If they fix this," he said, "maybe my daughter will stop parking 3 neighborhoods over." The door opened. We filed back in. The board returned to their places looking a shade more serious, as if their coffee had sobered them. Cheryl lifted the mic. "Thank you for your comments," she said, voice smooth but edged. "The board will schedule an internal dispute resolution meeting with Miss My Name and management. In the interim, management is directed to place a moratorium on towing from private driveways absent clear hazard and to review entrance signage for compliance." A breath I didn't know I'd been holding let itself out with an audible sound. Not a check. Not yet. But a door? Newly unlocked? "We will also," Lionel added, surprising me, "review the reimbursement request with counsel and respond within 10 business days." Patricia's pen rested. Derek typed. The gavel tapped. People stood. Outside, the night had cooled into a kind of mercy. We walked home together, a small parade of tired and slightly braver humans under the streetlights. The binder felt lighter in my hands, though nothing in it had changed. In my pocket, the magnets. Edges pressed a small half-moon into my leg. "You've got this," it seemed to say. Not as a wish this time, but as a fact I was beginning to believe. The internal dispute resolution meeting was set for Thursday at 4, the hour when classrooms exhale and offices steel themselves. I left the lab smelling faintly of vinegar from a dissolved egg experiment and drove to the clubhouse with my binder buckled in like a passenger. The magnet rode in my bag, its daisies bent from the jostle. "You've got this," it said. Or maybe I just needed it to. The conference room was smaller than the meeting hall, the sort of space where decisions pretend to be polite. A long laminate table, a pitcher of water with sweating sides, paper cups. Derek sat already, checking his email with the posture of someone who had been told to be neutral. Patricia had her legal pad and a stack of violation forms lined up like soldiers. Beside her was a man in a navy suit with a face like a freshly sharpened pencil. He stood and extended a hand. "Evan Blake, counsel for the association." His handshake was dry and exact. I put my binder on the table and tried to set down my fear with it. Mina squeezed my shoulder, then slid into a chair along the wall behind me. She'd insisted on coming. "Public comment is one thing," she'd said. "Private rooms need witnesses." "We'll be recording," Derek said, clicking a small red light to life. "This is an IDR conference per the CC&Rs. The goal is resolution." "Sounds good," I said, and heard the quaver hiding in the second word. Evan began with a statement that took the wind out of compassion and put it into procedure. The association has the right and the duty to enforce the governing documents. At the time of tow, your vehicle displayed an expired tag. He slid a printout toward me, a still from the tow company's photo with a timestamp. The plate looked naked without its sticker, as if my car had gone outside without a coat and been judged for the weather. Pursuant to Section 8.2, this is a violation. I nodded once, then slid my own page into the center. Exhibit C, Section 8.2, yellow highlight straight and bright. And pursuant to the second sentence in 8.2, I said, owner-occupied lots get 72 hours written notice affixed to the vehicle and an opportunity to cure. Shall is mandatory language. There was no hazard, there was no obstruction, no notice was affixed. I have a neighbor witness. I glanced at Mina, who lifted a hand like a benediction on Mrs. Larkin's behalf. A typed statement with her looping signature was clipped behind the tab like a hymn. Patricia's pen flicked. We placed a notice, she said, on the mailbox. Her tone said, same difference. I breathed, slow. The CC&Rs specify affixed to the vehicle. Words matter. Evan folded his hands. The intent is constructive notice mistamatame. Name. We're not here to split hairs. I thought of my students parsing hypotheses, of teaching them how a single variable can tilt an experiment. Hairs? Or rights? The heat in my voice surprised me, how clean it was. Also state. Law requires towing signage at entrances with specific language if vehicles are to be removed from private property without owner consent. Our entrance sign addresses street parking only. I brought photographs and the statute. The printout slid forward, annotated in my tidy teacher script, subsections circled. And your tow authorization? I tapped Exhibit B, Patricia's. Neat signature glowed there. Doesn't include a notice date because there wasn't one. Evan lifted a shoulder, a movement that could have meant anything. Even if the signage is imperfect, the registration was expired as displayed. Enforcement is consistent across the community. It's the owner's responsibility to display proof. I could hear my mother in my head, her voice from long ago PTA nights when she'd turn a single sentence into a lever. Don't argue everything. Argue what moves the thing. I put a fingertip on the word shall. You have two problems, I said, not raising my voice, letting the table listen. 1. Your own documents require notice affixed to the vehicle for owner-occupied lots. You skipped that. 2. State law constrains private property tows without entrance signage that actually says so. You don't have it. I paid that tow under protest and preserved my claim. I slid the stamped receipt forward. I'm asking you to reimburse the $285 you caused me to spend and to fix the process so my neighbors don't get shaken down at 5 in the morning. Patricia's gaze flicked to Derek, then back to her pad. Evan studied me like a specimen. And if the board declines? He asked. Polite menace folded into his tone like a crease. I file in small claims, I said, hearing how simple it sounded. I'll bring the CC&Rs, the statute, the contract you awarded to Towright last fall with its hold harmless clause. I touched the copy of the meeting minutes I'd found on the website, noting the motion and vote. And I'll bring Mr. Ortega and Mrs. Larkin and anyone else who's been towed from a driveway without notice. I'll also file a complaint with Consumer Protection. None of that will bankrupt anyone, but it will cost time and trust. I swallowed. You don't need me to be right to know this was wrong. The room went quiet enough to hear the ice, melting in the pitcher. Evan tapped the table once, lightly, as if testing its grain. Would you step out for 5 minutes while we confer? He asked, and managed to make it sound like a courtesy rather than a cage. In the hallway, my knees went watery now that my mouth had stopped. Mina handed me a paper cup of water, her thumb rubbing circles over my knuckles. Your voice didn't shake, she said. Mine would have. It did, I said low. Inside, we watched dust float in the sun slicing through the high window. I thought of my car sitting startled in that tow lot, of my students puzzling over capillary action, of how anger had taught me to read. When they called us back in, Derek's laptop was closed, which felt like a good sign, and Patricia's pen was lying flat. Evan's voice lost its edge. "The association will reimburse the $285 within 10 business days," he said. "We will also issue a directive clarifying that notices must be affixed to vehicles on owner-occupied lots prior to any tow, absent hazard, and suspend towing from private driveways until signage is updated. We'll consult on entrance signs to ensure compliance." I exhaled. The air tasted like metal and relief. "Thank you," I said, and meant the words for the outcome, not the ordeal. "There will be no admission of liability," Evan added, as if warding off a ghost. "Of course," I said. "I'm not asking for an apology in the minutes. I'm asking for neighbors not to wake up with a hole where their car should be." Patricia's mouth softened, almost. Derek slid a form across for my signature acknowledging the IDR resolution. I read it, because that is who I had become, and then signed. Mina squeezed my shoulder again, a quiet hallelujah. As we stood, Evan said, "For what it's worth, you presented well." It landed like a compliment and a warning both. I nodded. My binder was lighter than when I'd carried it in. Or maybe I was. Outside, the late afternoon sky had opened into a benevolent blue. I sat in my car and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel, feeling the old vinyl give, the familiar way a thing that knows you yields. In the passenger seat, the magnet had fallen out of my bag. I picked it up and smoothed the bent pedals. "You've got this," it insisted. I smiled, the first real one of the week, and drove home with the windows cracked, the binder's tabs chattering in the back like happy teeth. On the kitchen table, I laid out the signed resolution beside the stamped receipt and took a picture. I sent to Mina, to Mr. Ortega, to Mrs. Larkin with the message, "Progress." The check would come later. The sign would change later. The feeling came now, a simple physical rebalancing like a bubble in a level settling at center. I brewed tea. I let my shoulders drop. And for the first time since the morning my driveway looked like a missing tooth, I believed that I hadn't just gotten my car back. I had gotten a little piece of my house back too, the part where the rules live, and the part of me that knows how to read them. The check arrived on a Tuesday in an envelope the color of oatmeal. The return address, a small, officious rectangle, Ridgetop Oaks Association. It was thin enough to make me doubt myself and heavy enough to make me carry it inside like a fragile thing. I slid my car key under the flap and felt the paper split with a whisper. The check slipped out. $285, the numbers neat, the memo line reading, IDR resolution. No apology, no confession, just math. I laughed once, a short, surprised sound, and then I sat at the kitchen table and cried the small, quiet kind of tears you cry when something that shouldn't have happened is finally, actually being undone. I took a photo, checked next to the purple, paid under protest receipt, texted it to Mina, to Mr. Ortega, to Mrs. Larkin. Replies bloomed in my phone, a string of arm-flexing emojis. "Yes," from Mr. Ortega, all caps like a shout across a yard. "Well, good," from Mrs. Larkin, which is her way of throwing confetti. The next day, as I turned into the neighborhood with the sun throwing coins of light through the oaks, a ladder sprouted by the entrance like a silver reed. 2 maintenance men wrestled a new sign into place beneath the neighborhood name. I parked and walked over, my Civic ticking as it cooled. "Water?" I asked, and handed them bottles from the back seat. Then, feeling a little like a trespasser, "On my own victory," I read. It was longer than the old one. It said what it needed to say. Vehicles may be removed from private property only in compliance with state law. Towing from owner-occupied driveways requires written notice affixed to the vehicle and 72 hours to cure, unless there is an immediate hazard or obstruction of emergency access. It listed tow right, sure, but it listed due process first. Words that had once been buried inside a binder now faced every person who rolled into our streets. Black letters against white metal. I touched the edge of the sign, not a blessing exactly, more like a test, and felt its cool sturdiness under my fingers. At school, I told my students that rules are tools, not weapons. Jordan raised his hand and asked if I'd fought the HOA, and won, and then fell backward in his chair, grinning when I said, "We worked it out." When the bell rang, he lingered. "You didn't yell," he guessed. "You read. Both are kinds of volume," I said, and his grin steadied into something like respect. That weekend, a little knot of us gathered at my kitchen table with coffee and muffins, sweating under cling wrap. The binder sat open like a guest who had finally been invited to speak. I'd made a handout, a neighbor's guide to not getting steamrolled. Because I am a teacher and we make handouts the way bakers make bread. It had bullet points in bold type, and the line "Shall" means shall in a rectangle like a label you might slap on a jar of preserves. Mr. Ortega's daughter, Camilla, took a copy and ran her finger down the list like she was counting beads. "They took mine from the guest spot by the pool," she said, cheeks pink with leftover embarrassment. "Said my tag was expired. We paid." She swallowed. "I don't really want to talk in a meeting." "You don't have to," I said. "But if you want to file, I'll go with you. We'll bring the sign." I nodded toward the door as if I could see the new letters through our walls. "And we'll bring the word shall." Mina stuck a post-it to the binder. Parking, fences, gates, ponds, she'd written with wide, cheerleader handwriting, a joke about how many skirmishes our sleepy street had fought in good company. "We should make this a thing," she said. "Coffee and CC&Rs first Saturday of the month. We'll start a little library of common sense." We laughed. We were joking, sort of, but we were also scheduling. The next open board meeting came with less stomach acid. I sat in the back beside Mrs. Larkin and knitted my index card into my hands, just in case. Cheryl, in a blazer the color of a storm sky, called the meeting to order. The new sign got a nod. The moratorium on driveway tows got another. Lionel, of the calculator watch, announced that the towing contract had been amended to require photo proof of notice affixed to the vehicle before any non-hazard tow. Patricia's pen didn't hover this time. It wrote. During public comment, Mr. Ortega stood and cleared his throat. "My daughter's tow," he said. "We're asking for the same courtesy you gave Lot 14. He didn't say reimbursement. He didn't say right. But the words were in the room anyway, sitting politely in the second row. Cheryl nodded and asked him to submit his documents for IDR. He sat down. We breathed. Afterward, in the hallway that still smelled faintly of chlorine and lemon cleaner, Cheryl caught my arm. "We're forming a rules committee," she said, her smile not quite so brittle. "Plain language, education. Would you consider—" I considered. I thought of the days when I would have preferred to bring muffins and keep my head down. I thought of my students watching the world for what it promises and what it delivers. "I will," I said, with the understanding that glitter is not a safety hazard. She laughed, and we both seemed relieved to be people for a minute, not roles. At home, the oil stain on my driveway was still there, Florida-shaped, the panhandle thinning in the summer sun. My Civic settled into its spot like a cat returning to a favorite patch of light. I ran my palm over its hood and felt absurdly grateful for a dent and a bit of rust. There's a comfort in the imperfect because it does not pretend. One morning, early, I woke to that amber truck light strobing against my blinds and my chest went cold. I padded to the window, heart churning. The tow truck idled by the pool. The driver hopped out, phone in hand, squatted to photograph a pickup in a fire lane, then affixed a bright notice to its windshield with slow, deliberate motions, like a man following a recipe someone had finally taught him to read. When he drove away, the fire lane clear, the notification bright and unavoidable, I felt something unclench behind my ribs that had been tight for longer than I knew. I put the binder back on the shelf. Not away, never again away, but not on the table either, not a barricade. It lived there now beside the dog-eared cookbook and the manual for the fancy blender I never fully understood. When I reached for it, I reached for knowledge, not war. The magnet with the daisies moved back to the fridge, center stage. I'd smoothed the bent petals so many times they shone. One evening, I found a second magnet beside it, construction paper cut into clumsy flowers. Jordan must have made it during study hall and slipped it into my bag with the subtlety of a 12-year-old trying to be a magician. "You've got this," it said in bubble letters. Underneath, small and crooked. "We've got this." On a walk, Mina asked if I'd do it all again. The letters, the meetings, the shaking hands over plastic. Tables, the voice that discovered its edges in rooms that echo. I thought about it as we passed the entrance, the new sign catching light. "I didn't want to," I said. "I wanted the world to work the quiet way. But if the choice is between being steamrolled and learning how to read the machine, I'll learn the machine every time." She hooked her arm through mine. "You always were a reader. Home is not just the square of land and the roof that keeps the rain off. It's the grammar we agree to live by and the courage to underline the verbs when someone forgets them." The morning they towed my car from my driveway, something was unmade. By the time the check cleared and the new signs shone and Camilla's IDR got scheduled, something else had been made in its place. A small, sturdy knowledge that the ground is yours because you know the words that keep it so. At night now, when the house has gone to whisper, and the street is a ribbon under the moon. I sometimes stand at the window and look at the driveway. My keys weigh my pocket. Familiar. The oil stain looks back like a little map of where I've been and what I've had to navigate. I touch the magnet as I pass the fridge and feel its tug, light but sure. "You've got this," it says. "We've got this," the new one answers, and in that small chorus I hear something like a promise kept.